Tonight, overcharged. The former ACCC chair calls for tough new laws to protect Australians from price gouging. High Court win for native title holders over the operator of the MacArthur River mine. A flood of support for King Charles after his shock cancer diagnosis. And a close encounter with the biggest fish in the ocean. Good evening, Kyle Dowling with ABC News. The former chair of the ACCC says Australians are being overcharged because of a lack of competition. In a blistering 80-page report into price gouging, Professor Alan Fels took aim at some of Australia's biggest companies, including banks, supermarkets and airlines. He's called on the government to step in, saying Australians are paying too much too often.
2 for 5 strawberries.
The public outrage is loud and clear.
The big corporations are taking us to the cleaners. It's over for the little fella. It's over.
And now there is higher calls for change.
The Australian government needs to act. Australians are paying prices that are too high too often. And the cause is weak and ineffective competition.
Professor Fell's report into price gouging is scathing. Its targets include energy retailer AGL, the major supermarkets and Qantas.
They have squandered some of their good name as a national champion.
The founding chair of the ACCC wants to make it an offence to charge excessive prices, a review of the electricity sector's wholesale market, and tougher laws that allow big business to be broken up if they've abused their market power.
Business pricing has contributed significantly to inflation.
The union that commissioned Fell's report is also agitating for change, while big business is claiming bias.
We are extremely sceptical about the report that Professor Fels has produced. I think it's ironic to hold an inquiry like this and to find that it comes out with recommendations for at least another 13 reviews or inquiries.
The Fels report isn't binding, but it does come as the government conducts its own inquiries into merger laws and supermarket pricing. Professor Fels says the vulnerable are paying the price for rising inflation. Charities are being inundated by needy people who can't afford the rising cost of living, like pensioner Peter Richards.
We all matter. It's not just bucks and profit. So you just look at us little people.
Rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. I'm just hoping that big businesses and others can understand the desperate need.
A reminder that profit pushing has a price. Amelia Terzon, ABC News.
A group of native title holders from the MacArthur River region has won a High Court battle blocking the expansion of a major open-cut mine. The dispute between 3 native title holders and a subsidiary of Glencore has spanned a decade and raised critical questions about native title rights.
After a decade-long legal battle, a final answer. The High Court has ruled in favour of native title owners, blocking mining giant Glencore from expanding its MacArthur River mine. In 2013, the company applied for a mineral lease to construct a new dredge dumping area on land it owns near the Bing Bong port. Native title owners argued the new dumping area would affect their native title rights. And today, the High Court agreed, striking out an earlier federal court ruling and ordering the Northern Territory government to refuse the lease.
The court decision today really clears the air in terms of understanding native title holders do have rights. Rights now established in law.
In its judgment, the High Court found the dumping area would be constructed on land separate to where the mining takes place, and the ordinary meaning of mining does not encompass the transportation of mined ore to customers. As a result, the judges agreed the dumping area could not be regarded as necessary.
The Northern Land Council calls on MRM to now listen to native title holders, hear their concerns and gain their consent.
Court documents state the current dumping area is full and a new one is necessary. But NT Minister for Mining, Mark Monaghan, says Glencore will not need to cease operations as the government is working with all parties. Despite the decision, the General Manager of McArthur River Mine says he respects the High Court's decision and will continue to engage with native title holders and the NLC about the area that's been in dispute. Roxanne Fitzgerald, ABC News.
A Northern Territory police officer charged with rape, aggravated assault and other offences has been committed to stand trial in the Supreme Court. In a short committal hearing at the Darwin local court today, his lawyer Luke Officer conceded there was a case for his client to answer. The officer remains in custody at the Alice Springs prison, suspended from duty without pay. While NT legislation would usually allow for the man to be identified once he is committed to trial, Judge Julie Franz granted a suppression order over his identity in order to protect the identity of the complainant. Northern Territory Chief Minister was in Tennant Creek today, meeting with the beleaguered Jalalakari Council in the wake of an investigation into its financial management. The Aboriginal Corporation delivers a range of services to the Barkly region, and concerns have been raised over the alleged misappropriation of hundreds of thousands of dollars in funding. The Office of the Registrar of Indigenous Corporations has appointed an insolvency and forensic accounting firm to look at Jalalakari's books. The office has confirmed it began an investigation after an audit identified financial anomalies and that it's now referred the matter to police. It is the latest blow to the council, which has faced a slew of issues over governance and mismanagement in recent years. Mental health education is becoming a staple in school curriculums, starting from a young age. Rolling out across all schools in the Northern Territory, the BU program hopes to normalise talking about mental health and equip schools with healthy coping mechanisms. Delivered by Beyond Blue, Headspace and Early Childhood Australia, the initiative has already made an impact in some Territory schools.
At Ludmilla Primary School in Darwin, sharing your emotions is first on the classroom agenda.
If I'd done it when I first walked in, I might have been, yeah.
It was one of the first schools to implement the BU initiative, which strips things back to basics.
How to even be a good friend, how to stand up to a bully, how to reach out and ask for help when you're not feeling well.
The program educates teachers on how to recognise the signs of poor mental health and what they can do to help.
The initiative really supports educators to increase their mental health and wellbeing knowledge and gives them some practical tools and some skills to be able to support children and young people within their schools and early learning services.
The framework is catered to fit the unique needs of each school. Ludmilla have engaged leaders from the local Aboriginal community, Bagot, to start a walking school bus and school attendance program, creating a culturally safe environment for students.
They've got a good relationship with the teachers here and with us workers on the community, and they very feel safe about talking about any problems that they have.
Liz picked the school specifically for its wellbeing framework.
Love you. Have a great day at school. Love you too.
And she's witnessed positive impacts on her kids.
There's emotional resilience. There's physical health, mental health, enhanced self-confidence, self-esteem, social skills.
The program is being rolled out in every school across the Northern Territory, with Ludmilla Primary the star pupil. They say the results speak for themselves.
Teacher satisfaction. And I believe it is because of the emphasis through BU and Beyond Blue that we place on wellbeing of our staff, our students and our community.
Happy students, happy teachers, happy school. Isabella Tolhurst, ABC News, Darwin.
Governments across Australia are failing Indigenous communities with their closing the gap policies by taking a business as usual approach. That's one of the scathing findings from today's Productivity Commission. It's called on governments to relinquish power and share it with Indigenous-run organisations to achieve real change.
Across health, education and housing, Aboriginal-run organisations are delivering services every day under the Closing the Gap agreement. Now a damning report is criticising government for not keeping its end of the deal.
The majority of funding relating to services for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people actually doesn't go to the community-controlled sector. It goes to the NGO sector, which is not us.
Aboriginal community-controlled organisations have told the Productivity Commission review of the National Agreement on Closing the Gap it's not working.
The intention was that governments would work with the Aboriginal community-controlled sector, acknowledging that they were underfunded compared to their non-Indigenous counterparts, and that has not yet happened across the entire agreement.
Closing the Gap is 15 years old. But in 2020, governments signed up to a radical overhaul, promising to share power with Indigenous-run organisations. Today's report says governments are unwilling to relinquish control and aren't revealing where and what it's spending money on.
What we need to do is hold Indigenous organisations responsible for the money that the taxpayer is giving them and stop turning a blind eye to make sure that money is being well spent.
Aboriginal community-controlled organisations are already audited. There are really, really strong controls in place.
The Productivity Commission spent 3 years looking into the effectiveness of the 2020 agreement. What was prevalent in the submissions was tension over money.
Yes, we did see examples where funding was given to external bodies outside of the Aboriginal community-controlled sector.
A message noted by the nation's leader.
We'll continue to put forward practical measures in order to close the gap, and we'll be making our statements when the Closing the Gap report is tabled shortly.
Carly Williams, ABC News.
Workers could soon be given the right to disconnect from the office and ignore phone calls and emails after hours. The federal parliament appears set to pass new laws granting a right to switch off as part of a broader package of industrial relations reforms.
It's a phone call that can ruin a weekend.
Hello?
And soon, workers will have the right to simply ignore it.
Millions of Australian workers give their time unpaid through their phone or their computer on weekends and outside their paid working time.
Federal Parliament looks set to pass new laws creating a right to disconnect.
What we're simply saying is that someone who's not being paid 24 hours a day shouldn't be penalised if they're not online and available 24 hours a day.
It means that you have the right to refuse to be contacted where it is unreasonable in relation to your work outside your working time.
The new laws will be fairly simple. Employers will still have the right to contact their staff out of work hours, be it via email, text or phone. But workers will have the right to simply ignore it and can't be punished for doing so. The rules recognise there can be good reasons for employers getting in touch, like shift changes or work emergencies. When disputes happen, they will ultimately be decided by the Fair Work Commission.
I think this is really, a triumph of stupidity over common sense.
Business groups and the opposition warn the rules could threaten flexibility in the workplace.
If we're genuine about flexible workplaces, if we're genuine about allowing people to take time off to go and pick up their kids from school, for instance, well then I think we've got to have sensible conversations about what rights and obligations exist.
This wasn't the government's idea. It's something the Greens negotiated into a broader IR package. It includes things like changing the way casual work is defined to better reflect a worker's actual shift patterns and setting minimum standards for gig workers, like a base rate of pay for Uber drivers and food delivery riders. Those are bigger government priorities, but a right to disconnect is something it was happy to add on. Tom Lowry, ABC News, Canberra.
Coming up on 7:30, Sarah Ferguson sits down with opposition leader Peter Dutton.
Was it humiliating for you to have to stand up and support Labor's changes to the tax cuts?
Well, Sarah, we stood up for people that we want to see given assistance, and it's $15 a week. It doesn't start until July, and it addresses some of the damage that Labor's done to the economy.
The lawyer for a police officer charged over the fatal tasering of 95-year-old Claire Nowland says the senior constable intends to plead not guilty to manslaughter. Today, 33-year-old Christian White faced Cooma Court, where a series of other charges, including recklessly causing grievous bodily harm, were withdrawn. Ms Nowland died in hospital last year, a week after she was tasered while holding a knife at a Cooma nursing home. The case against the officer, who remains suspended from duty with pay, will move to the Supreme Court in April. A ceasefire in the Israel-Gaza war could be a step closer, with Hamas militants said to be positive about a new framework for a truce. While details of the deal have not been publicly released, the US has expressed scepticism it'll be accepted by Israel.
A glimmer of hope after 4 gruelling months. Hamas militants react to a proposal to once again pause fighting in the Gaza Strip.
The response includes some comments on the framework, but in its entirety, it is a positive response.
While those involved are not saying much, US President Joe Biden says the demands are being considered.
It seems to be a little over the top. We're not sure where it is. There's a continuing negotiation right now.
The deal, put together by Israel, the US, Qatar and Egypt, is believed to include a 6-week truce and another exchange of hostages for Palestinian prisoners. It can't come any sooner for Israelis being held captive by Hamas. The IDF has confirmed that 136 hostages remain, with fears that as many as 31 are dead.
The proposal for a ceasefire was sent to Hamas a week ago. It's believed to include a demand that Israel releases thousands of Palestinian prisoners in return for the hostages, a demand that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has previously ruled out.
In Jerusalem, protesters picket the office of the UN's Agency for Palestinian Refugees. Israel alleges UNRWA workers were involved in the October 7 attacks. The UN has launched an internal and external investigation. But a probe by Britain's Channel 4 has found no evidence of the claims that led to a tranche of countries, including Australia, withdrawing funds.
What we need to see from UNRWA now is transparent leadership in respect of their activities.
In Rafah, Israel is ramping up its assault. Gaza's southernmost city is home to hundreds of thousands of displaced people. Desperately hoping an end to this conflict is finally in sight. John Lyons, ABC News, Jerusalem.
King Charles has been seen in public for the first time since his shock cancer diagnosis. The news triggered a flood of well wishes, as well as a reunion with his estranged son, Prince Harry. Some royal watchers say this diagnosis may help the family heal their well-publicised rift.
The King spotted for the first time since announcing his cancer battle, and he was all smiles. The 75-year-old and his wife waved to onlookers outside Buckingham Palace. All eyes were on the royal reunion. Prince Harry landed in London after learning of his dad's diagnosis, the Duke of Sussex arriving at his father's residence alone and leaving less than an hour later. It's the first time the pair is believed to have met since the coronation in May, but it's understood he has no plans to see his brother, Prince William.
This whole family feud seems a bit silly in my opinion. They should make up and hopefully this brings them together a little bit more.
Many families have grim diagnoses of horrible diseases and what tends to happen is that you park the minor grievances and get on with the big stuff. So I think he'd be delighted that he's got both of his sons back on home soil.
Other royals were stepping up.
Your Royal Highness, how is the King?
Princess Anne attending multiple public events in England. While well-wishers poured in from around the world, the British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak reassured the public he's in regular contact with the King and revealed he caught his cancer in the early stages.
I think that gives great hope and encouragement to other people who are facing a cancer diagnosis, encouraging people to go to their GP to get checked out.
There's been no further updates from the palace on the King's health, and it's expected that from this point forward, many details of his treatment and recovery will be kept private. Charles and Camilla left London for their Sandringham estate in the countryside, where the King can get peace and privacy between treatments. Isabella Higgins, ABC News, London.
After 11 hours of deliberations, the mother of an American teenager who shot dead 4 of his classmates has been found guilty of involuntary manslaughter. Prosecutors in the first-of-its-kind trial argued she and her husband failed to prevent the shooting by giving their son a gun and ignoring warning signs.
A mother found guilty 2 years after her child's violent crimes.
Jennifer Crumbly was convicted of 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter, one for every student shot dead by her son.
It was a long time coming, but it's definitely a step toward the accountability like what we've been talking about. It's kind of been our goal the whole time.
Ethan Crumbly has already been sentenced to life in prison for killing his classmates when he was 15 years old. Prosecutors alleged he'd received the gun as a Christmas present from his parents. But when they were called to the school hours before the shooting to discuss a violent drawing he'd done, they didn't take him home or reveal that he'd been given a weapon.
There's a lot of stuff that could have easily thwarted this whole thing. It could have been stopped very easily.
This case is believed to be the first time that a parent in the US has been convicted of such serious offences over a mass shooting carried out by their child. And while gun control advocates hope it sends a warning to other parents, there's also some concern about the precedent it could set.
I understand why a prosecutor would want to try it. I mean, you know, I have children too, and it's terrifying when we drop them off to school. We think they're safe. On the other hand, there's this kind of moral intuition that at some point you can't be responsible for somebody else's behaviour.
Ethan Crumbly's father, James Crumbly, is facing the same involuntary manslaughter charges and will go to trial next month. Jade McMillan, ABC News.
Investigators say a door that flew off a Boeing 737 MAX shortly after takeoff last month was missing 4 key bolts. The US Transportation Safety Board says the bolts, which are meant to lock the unused door to the fuselage, appeared to be missing. The preliminary findings provide the first official look into what happened after the Alaska Airlines flight took off. The plane made an emergency landing and all 177 people on board escaped with no major injuries. The Federal Aviation Administration says it will hold Boeing accountable for any safety violations.
We've begun an audit of Boeing's production and quality control practices, and we've informed Boeing that the FAA will not grant any production expansion of the MAX until we're satisfied the quality control issues uncovered during this process are resolved.
To finance now, and the planned $80 billion merger between gas giants Woodside and Santos is off. Here's Alan Kohler.
Well, Woodside and Santos both said that they decided to end the merger discussions, but the fact that Santos shares fell 5.8% and Woodside went up suggests that Woodside is the dumper and Santos the dumpee. Elsewhere, the online fashion retailer Satir delivered a pretty good result and the shares jumped 25%. And NAB appointed a new CEO, Andrew Irvine, who's been running NAB's business bank for 3.5 years, having been hired from the Bank of Montreal. He takes over in April from Ross McEwen, who came from the Royal Bank of Scotland 4 years ago. Now, here's a chart of the Big Four bank share prices rebased to December 2019 when Ross McEwen took over. There was a moment 2 years ago when NAB snuck ahead of Commonwealth, but normal service has since been restored, with NAB in second place. Global markets mostly rose last night and today. Small moves all round on commodity markets, gold, copper and oil up, iron ore down. And the Australian dollar snuck up a few points to 65.3 US cents. Now, there's a lot of focus at the moment on China's economic slowdown, but it's actually following a well-worn path. When Japan's and Korea's per capita GDP reached $7,000 US, their economic growth maxed out and started to decline. China is doing the same thing at the same rate. But China is not following Japan as a destination for Australian exports. It is buying twice as much as a percentage of Australian GDP as Japan did in the 70s and 80s. In fact, China is as important to the Australian economy now as Britain was in the early 20th century. And that's finance.
A-League record goal scorer Michelle Heyman has been selected into the Matildas squad for a crucial Olympic qualifier to replace Sam Kerr. Heyman comes into the Matildas squad for the 2 games against Uzbekistan at the end of the month, which the Matildas need to win to secure an Olympic berth. The 36-year-old Canberra United striker has scored 10 goals this season to become the first woman in the A-League to score 100 goals. Heyman hasn't played for the Matildas for 6 years, during which she took a year out of the game for mental health reasons.
I feel like I'm 21 again. It's a great feeling. It's been 6 years since I've put on the green and gold and represented my country. And for myself to get this call up was just, it's changed my life.
Australia's lost 3 early wickets in their second one-day international against South Africa in Sydney, with another excellent performance from Marizanne Kapp helping South Africa to build a solid total in the rain-affected match. Rain stopped play several times and reduced the game to 45 overs each after Australia won the toss and elected to bowl. Laura Woolvart lasted 3 balls before the Proteas' middle order steadied the innings. Kapp making her 3rd straight half-century as South Africa set Australia a DLS revised total of 234 for victory. Kapp also secured the crucial wickets of Australia captain Alyssa Healy and the dangerous Beth Mooney early in the home side's innings. Former Australian captain Ricky Ponting says he's taken on a coaching role in the T20 Major Cricket League so he can be a part of the sport's growth in the United States. Ponting has been appointed coach of the Washington Freedom for the 2nd edition of the competition. The league will now follow the Men's T20 Cup, which will be held in the US and the Caribbean. Ponting believes the Major Cricket League will help the sport's bid to crack the American market.
I'd heard a lot about it, heard a lot of great things about it, and I think it's just the tip of the iceberg was where cricket potentially heads in the US. So I just felt it was a really good opportunity for me to get involved now.
2 fishermen have had a rare close encounter with a whale shark off the east coast of Queensland. Thomas D'Amelio was fishing with a friend in waters near Garee when the curious creature swam right up to his boat. The ocean's largest fish are most often seen off Western Australia, but occasionally are spotted on the east coast. The whale shark swam a couple of laps around the boat before making its way, leaving the fishermen enough time to snap a few pictures of the once-in-a-lifetime encounter. And turning to the weather now, and tonight's weather pick at Kakadu has been sent in by Rosalind Malian. A line of thunderstorms has been tracking north to the top end today. Thunderstorms also in the Tanami and Lassiter districts. It was 33 in Darwin today, 35 in Jabiru. Further out, 35 degrees in Katherine. It was 36 in Borroloola and a top of 34 in Maningrida. A top of 34 degrees in Alice Springs today. It was 36 in Yulara and Tennant Creek. On the satellite, thunderstorm clouds cover most of northern Australia. There's also some cloud and thunderstorms about Queensland as well as New South Wales. There's a trough near the northwest WA coast which stretches across the top end, and southeasterly winds are being directed through central Australia due to a high in the Bight which extends a ridge over the south of the country. Interstate tomorrow, a top of 25 degrees in Hobart. Melbourne also reaching 24 degrees, 24 for Canberra. Cloudy in Sydney, 25. Rain and 30 degrees for Brisbane, 29 degrees in Adelaide tomorrow. And in WA, a hot and sunny 39 degrees for Perth. Back in the Territory tomorrow, Alice Springs headed for 35 degrees, windy and 38 in Tennant Creek and 37 in Yulara. In the north, possible storm and 33 in Katherine, a top of 35 in Mataranka and Daly Waters. To the west, 32 for Wadair and showers in Darwin reaching a top of 31 tomorrow. Extreme fire danger conditions are forecast to continue in the Barkly North. Fresh southeasterly winds and hot temperatures are expected to continue, and there's a chance of thunderstorms in the area. There will be a low tide tomorrow at 10 past 10 in the morning and a high tide at 5:16 in the afternoon. The sun will rise tomorrow at 6:42 and set at 7:19. Possible storms and cloudy conditions ahead for Darwin and a high chance of showers continuing for the rest of the week. Mostly clear and sunny in Alice Springs. Temperatures, though, could pick up again from early next week. Stay with us now. Sarah Ferguson is up next with 7:30. Good night.